In Chapter 4, we're going to take a look at a variety of ways to summarize and consolidate data within a workbook. And you'll notice on page 103 some of the objectives here. We're going to summarize data by creating formulas with range names that reference to other worksheets. So we've already created range names, we know how to do that. We're going to use those in formulas, which we've actually done that as well, but those formulas are going to be in other worksheets. So that may be a different twist to what we've seen before. We'll also modify the range that's been assigned to a given range. So we're modifying a range name. We'll summarize data by creating 3D formulas. And essentially that's just taking cells from more than one sheet and adding them together or averaging them together in some way. We'll create formulas that link to cells in other worksheets or workbooks. We'll also learn to edit a link to a source workbook. We'll have a source workbook and a destination workbook. Once that link's been created, we'll also learn to break a link to those external resources or references. And then we're going to use another method of consolidating data, and that's the consolidate feature, which will summarize data in multiple worksheets. And then the latter half looks at creating, editing, and formatting a pivot table, filtering a pivot table using slicers, creating and formatting a pivot chart, and then creating and formatting sparklines. So there's a variety of things we're going to be looking at in Chapter 4. Make sure that you do read through the first paragraph there. It gives you kind of an overview of what we're going to be looking at in Chapter 4. But as I mentioned previously, we're looking at a variety of tools that Excel has to summarize data within a worksheet, a workbook, or even among workbooks. On pages 104, 105, you'll see the model answers again for each of the projects that we'll be completing throughout the chapter. We're going to begin Project 1 by naming some ranges, editing some named ranges, and then we're going to look at finding totals for numbers and data within a workbook and also between workbooks. So as you can see, we'll be using 2 or 3 different features here in Project 1 to consolidate and pull information together from other areas within a workbook or other workbooks. Project 1A asks that we open up May Park entries, and we're going to save that as Excel Level 2 Chapter 4 Project 1 May Park entries. And as you look at this workbook, notice there are 4 sheets within the workbook. We have kind of a total sheet, and this is where we're actually going to summarize the data among the worksheets and also from another workbook. The Bryce Canyon, if you look at that, that shows you the attendance for each of these days for Bryce Canyon. Grand Canyon, same type of situation. It's giving you each of the days and how many people or how many vehicles came through their gates. And then the last one's Mesa Verde, and again showing you the attendance for the individual days. So with that, we're going to take a look before we put any summary information on the attendance summary sheet. We are going to look at some of the ranges that have already been named, and then we're also going to edit those ranges and then add a new named range. So let's go to the name box. I'm going to click on the drop down arrow. I'm going to click on Bryce. If you'll notice, that goes to the Bryce Canyon worksheet, and it's selecting all the entries for the various days in May. Okay, so that's one named range. If we look at the name box again and go to Grand, notice it goes to the Grand Canyon sheet. This time though, it's only listing the entries for the first 16 days, and it hasn't picked up on the remaining days in May. So we'll probably need to edify that named range. And then finally, Mesa Verde is not even in there, and we'll want to use that in a formula as well. So we're going to leave Bryce Canyon the way it is, but Grand Canyon, we want to edit that named range called Grand and add the additional cells to that named range. So to edit a named range, we're going to go to the Formulas tab in the Defined Names group and then Name Manager. And that lists out the 2 named ranges that we have in our workbook. And we want to edit the Grand named range. So I'm going to click on that to select it, choose Edit, Notice Grand comes in, it shows you what it refers to. We also want to add, though, additional cells. So what I'm going to do, there's a variety of ways of doing this, but I'm going to click and drag through that. So we're going to reselect that range. I'm going to hold down the Control key, and I'm going to grab the range E7 through E21, and that'll encompass both of those areas. Okay, so we just edited that range. I'm going to click OK. Takes us back to the name manager. And then from here we could create a new named range. Just know that that's an alternative. I'm not going to do that necessarily. We're going to go back out to the worksheet and create a named range as we're used to. So I'm going to close out the name manager, and we'll test this one time. I'm going to go back to Grand. Should be highlighting these cells for all 31 days. Okay, and then Mesa Verde, it doesn't have any named range, so we're going to name it Mesa, but we want to include the entries. So I'm going to select B7 through B22. Holding down the Control key, I'm going to grab E7 through E21, and then to name that range, I'm going to click inside the name box, type in Mesa, and press Enter. So now we've got the 3 sheets with its appropriate corresponding cells for the named ranges. And if you want to test it again, see how it goes back to Bryce Canyon. If I go to Grand Canyon, it should be selecting all the entries for that. And then finally, Mesa. It's going to Mesa Verde, and it has the appropriate cells included in that named range. Now, once those ranges have been named, we're going to go back to the attendance summary sheet, and we're going to put a formula in cell F7 that will total, sorry about that, that will total all of the entries for the various parks. And so there's 2 ways that they're going to show us how to do that. And the first way is just the simple sum formula that includes the named ranges. And so they have us typing these in. If I go back to the, well, actually formulas work. There's the auto sum function right there. I'll click on that, and then we're going to type in each one of the named ranges. So we first have Bryce. Notice the syntax here. Need a comma after that. And then the next range of cells that we named was Grand, or it was already named, we just modified it. Putting a comma between it, and then also Mesa. So what it's doing here is it's going to sum all those ranges of cells that we have named. I'm going to press Enter. That gives us 10,460. And then we can format that to comma and 0 decimals. Okay? Alright, we're going to do the same thing. Now I'm going to save this again and close out of it. We'll open it up one more time a little bit later, but I'm going to close out of this. They want us to open up May Park entries again, and we're going to save it this time as still Excel Level 2, Chapter 4, Project 1, but we're going to add 3D to the end of that. And what's going to happen with this is we're going to create a 3D formula or 3D reference that will still include the sum function, but you'll see how it takes a little different twist. The previous total that we made for the attendance summary, we used the sum function, but we had to go, if we had 10 sheets within our workbook, 10 different parks, we would have to type in each one of the ranges, which can be a little tedious at times. Another way, though, that we could, still using the sum function, but it's called the 3D cell reference, is we can click on the sheet tabs and then make reference to the cells in each one of these sheets that we want to add. Now, keep in mind, the only way we can do the 3D cell reference formula is if all of these sheets have been set up the same. So every sheet, in our case, every park, they've put the days and the entries in the same cells. So that makes the 3D cell reference work very nicely. Alright, so we're back in the attendance summary sheet in cell F7. Still going to click on the auto sum. Now, the 3D cell reference, what you're going to do on this is you'll click on the sheet tabs first. I'm going to click on the first sheet tab, which is Bryce Canyon. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click on the last one. So you can see now, if we would have had 10 sheets, I would have clicked on the first one, held down the Shift key and click on the last one. That highlights everything in between. You can see that right here. And then also notice in the formula bar, Bryce Canyon : Mesa Verde. Now what that means to the computer and to Excel is that any sheets that colon represents through, so any sheets Bryce through Mesa Verde will be included in this formula. Now, it knows what sheets to add, but it doesn't know what cells to add yet. So it doesn't matter really what sheet we're on, but we're selecting B7 through B22, and I'm going to hold down the Control key and grab E7 through E21. Okay, so you can see here it's got two different references, but it's taken Bryce Canyon through Mesa Verde, B7 through B22, also Bryce Canyon, Mesa Verde, E7 through E21. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And again, we still get that same 10,460 that we saw earlier. You get the same results. This is just a little bit different way to proceed through that. All right, I'm going to set, let's go ahead and format that real quick. Comma and 0 decimals. And then I'll save that. And then we'll close out of that. I'm going to open back up the previous Maypark entries that use the sum and all the named ranges within it. And then they also ask us to open up an additional workbook. And I think I already have that open, Maypark Group Sales. Okay, now what we're going to do with this one, and I'm on page 110, we are going to look at linking data with other workbooks. And if you'll look at this Maypark Group Sales workbook, it's basically the commercial tool vehicles. We already have that in there, but it's showing, if you notice here, it's summing. And let's look at CV price for just a second. CV price, notice it's going to Bryce Canyon, but this is a little bit different data here. It's showing commercial tour vehicles only, whereas before we were looking at personal vehicle and individual entrances only. This particular one, Maypark Group, is looking at commercial tour vehicles, so you're getting a little bit different data, but it's still set up the same. And it has named ranges for each one of these. They've just chosen slightly different names for those ranges, but same concept it's showing here. Okay, so what we're going to do is take the data from this Maypark Group Sales workbook, and we're going to take the 15,000 and we're going to link it to the workbook that has the private vehicle. So when we're all done, we'll have the private vehicle and the commercial tour vehicles in one workbook. It will be linked though to our Maypark Group Sales workbook. So any changes that are made will automatically be updated to our Maypark entries. So let's try something here. I want to arrange these windows, these workbooks, so that we can see them both at the same time. So I'm going to go to the View tab and then Arrange All, and we'll arrange them vertically, I think. Alright, that works. So we got Maypark Group Sales here, Maypark Entries. This is the one that we've put in we've been working with as far as with the sum, Bryce, Grand, and Mesa. Okay. Now to link this, we do want to provide a little bit of description here. In cell A9, they want us to put in a title, Commercial Tour Vehicles Only. Okay, so that's our title. Again, we're going to pull it from over here, but it's going to be in this workbook, and we'll put the total, the linked amount, in cell F9. Okay, now to link to another workbook, just like we link to another cell, if you just type in an equal sign, and then if we go over to the Maypark Group Sales and click in the cell that has the actual amount, and then press enter, that's exactly what we did in previous linkages in a previous chapter. When we linked cells, we just typed in an equal sign and then point and clicked in the cell that we wanted to link to. Again, I'm going to go ahead and format this to comma, 0 decimals. But now it's been linked, and you can see in the formula bar it's linked to the Maypark Group Sales workbook, the attendance summary sheet, which you see here, and then F7 is the cell that it's been linked to. And then the final thing that we want to do in this Maypark entries is we want to put a total. We want to get a grand total of how many vehicles or cars have come through. So they're going to call this total attendance. And then essentially all we'll need to do is sum those two cells. So I'm going to click on the auto sum. I'll grab these two cells and then I'll press enter. And that gives us 25,529 is the grand total. Okay? Now I'm going to save. I'm going to close out of both of these, save that workbook. This one we didn't do anything to except we got information from it. I'm going to close out of it without saving because we haven't made any changes. And then what they want to direct our attention to is if you want to maintain those external references, you can certainly do that by looking at your source data. The source data was the one, the May Park Entries workbook, and that's the one where all the information is being stored. However, if we make changes to the May Park Group Sales workbook, okay, the one that had the commercial tour vehicles only, if we make changes there, then it would automatically change and update in our May Park Entries workbook. So we're going to test that to see if it really works, and they want us to do that by opening up the May Park Group Sales workbook. The May Park Group Sales. Okay, so now we're going to make a few changes here. Get this maximized. And I'm just going to make a couple of changes to some of these worksheets. We're going to go to Bryce Canyon first. And in cell B8, where it has 55, we're going to change that to 361. And I want you to kind of keep that in mind. That 15,375, that's going to be changing too because it's linked to all these cells. Then we're going to go to the Grand Canyon sheet. And in the Grand Canyon sheet, in cell B20, the 275 we're going to change to 240. And then finally in the Mesa Verde, we're going to go to cell E21, change that from 312 to 406. And I'm getting all these numbers from Project 1D on page 112. Now if we go back to the total for the attendance summary, notice the update there is 15,434. So it's keeping it updated based on the changes that we've made in each one of these sheets. And then if we go to our other workbook that we've linked to, that number should be there as well. It should automatically, well, not automatically, but it will give us an opportunity to update in that source or in the workbook that we link to. Okay. They asked that we save this under a slightly different name too, so let me go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to add the word source to the end. Okay. So we've saved those changes. I'm going to close out of that workbook. We're going to open up the May Park Entries. Okay. I'm going to open that up. Notice when you open it, if it's a linked or a workbook that has links in it, notice there's a security warning that appears below our ribbon. And it says automatic update of links have been disabled. So right now we don't see the update of the 15,434 yet. Okay. However, if we want to stay connected to that, we can go into enable content. And then from there, if that still doesn't work, you may have to go into the edit links. And let's see if, oh, maybe we can refresh it here. Okay, now if you notice, the 15069 is not updating, and I want to show you something. Sometimes it doesn't automatically update, so you sometimes have to press F9, but I've pressed F9, it still doesn't work, but I want to show you something. If we go to edit links, in the edit links it tells you what workbook you're linked to. If you'll notice that May Park Group Sales is what we were linked to. We made the change and saved it as source, and so we're no longer linked to the correct workbook. So on the right hand side, if you'll notice, we can change source. We want to change it to May Park Group Sales Source. Click OK. And then now you'll notice the 15,434. So I kind of, I'm glad we did that because it shows you how you have to be careful with what you're staying linked to. But if I had named it initially, put the source at the end, and then made those changes, then it would have worked just fine. As soon as we enabled content, it would have updated it. So while we're in here too, though, I want to show you how you can break a link. And we don't necessarily have to do this, but if you no longer want to be connected to that workbook, so if changes are made in the source workbook, they're constantly making changes to the vehicle tour, and you don't want that changing this workbook, you want to keep it constant, keep that particular number constant in the commercial tour vehicles only option. You can do that. You can break the link, clicking on break link. That will break the link to that. Actually, we'll just go ahead and do it, and then we'll close out of it. You'll notice now that that's just a raw number. It's not linked to that workbook anymore. So any changes made to the other workbook will not be updated.